What's up, guys? Coach Jared here with the Richmond Elite Podcast. Today we got episode 7, and I'm very excited to bring on my good buddies, Alec Buob. Alec is a Team USA powerlifter.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. No, you are a Team USA powerlifter.
Yeah.
In the 93 kilo weight class. Is that right?
Well, testically. Sorry. Technically 105. 105 for Team USA, but
you're normally 93.
Normally I'm 93. I'm already back down to 93.
But they were like, "Hey, we don't have anybody at 105. Will you go up?" And you probably weighed in at like what when you compete at 105?
I weighed in at 105.5.
Did you actually?
No, I think it's like 106 actually.
You mean 96? Are you saying you mean 96?
Oh, well, whoops, my bad. Yeah.
I was gonna say, dude, you didn't.
Sorry, I'm not.
You didn't weigh anywhere near 105.
I was like 94. I was 94.
Okay.
Maybe like right.
So you weighed
95.
10 kilos under the weight class, and then you still won your division. Or you still won.
Yes.
And what competition was that?
That was the North American Championships, NAPF.
Nice. And then what were your best lifts at that competition?
Oh man, it's kind of hard to even remember. It was three.
It was like a month, 3
325
months ago. 325 kilos.
325 kilos on squat.
Back squat, which is in pounds.
715?
715,
maybe 720.
It might be more than that, yeah. All right. Anyways,
something like
over
that.
700 pounds.
Bench, it was only like 185, which is like
You guys stayed light, right? Like you
yeah,
stayed
I didn't
light.
push it that crazy on bench. Really, once I hit squat, I knew that it was just kind of like I had to hit. I was just going for numbers that I knew if I hit these numbers, I was going to win. So like I changed up the first attempts. So like bench 185, that was a good number at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I hit 185, that was still a competition.
So
PR.
185 is 407.
Yeah, I say 407.
407 pounds. Your best in training, your best bench in training is 200 kilos. Right?
But that was after. Like
yeah,
I
I want to give the listeners your best lifts.
Okay. Well,
So
yeah,
your best
440
440
pounds
bench.
is my new best. Yes.
And then deadlift sucks. Your deadlift sucks.
Yeah, it's been a bad trend deadlift, but
What's your best deadlift?
310. So that's 683
Did you do that at the meet?
at a meet.
Amy, okay.
Not that meet, but
Sure. Okay.
not the most recent one. I bumped up my opener.
So measly 680 deadlift.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Real light work.
So anyways,
Rookie numbers.
he's kind of strong. He competes in powerlifting. Remember, that's different than Olympic weightlifting. That's
Basically
pretty.
the same thing.
No. Like I couldn't do any of the thing that he can do, and he certainly couldn't do anything I could do.
Watch me.
So anyways, pretty strong, pretty knowledgeable. You have a degree in exercise science.
Human performance and fitness.
Okay, same thing, right?
Totally different.
From Slam Bros.
Yep.
Good
old SAU.
Very notable, very prestigious university.
Yeah, we're like the Harvard of the Midwest, actually.
Okay.
We're the Harvard of human performance and fitness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If Harvard was stupid.
Anyways, regardless of, and this is what I want to do with this podcast, I kind of just want to bring on, elite athletes, elite coaches, elite, minds within the, health and fitness and strength conditioning background, and kind of get their philosophies on things and see how that can kind of help translate to, whether it's sports performance training or, whatever training that you're kind of looking to do. And, Alec, he started out as a bodybuilder. You want to go through, actually, let's start out, talk about high school.
Give my life story.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, it all started when I was born. 9 pounds, 7 ounces.
Dang.
No, actually, I have no idea.
Did you have that head too? That big ass?
I'd have a very big head. Yes. Not ego wise, but like literally a big head. No. So as far as like my lifting career, it started, like I started lifting when I was 12. Back then it was, when I first started, it was not like proper lifting. It was just, I wanted to look good, so I went to my community center. I'd started doing chest and abs almost every day. But so 12 years old is when I like started going to the gym regularly.
12 years old.
Yes.
Okay.
I would go
Well, that's
5 days a week.
I'm just 5 days a week. I'm just pointing that out because that's a lot of the kids that we start around that age.
And then I started getting like proper training through, like I had coaches similar to like what you do here.
Right.
Shout out to Adam Wasson, my first strength coach that taught me like technique and everything, and Aaron Witt, another good coach in the Central Illinois area.
But when you were 12, like I know you said you did like chest and abs every day, but like I'm guessing that your training was very general, meaning like
100%.
like it was,
yes.
And you didn't know any better, but it just ended up probably.
I didn't know how to even do a squat.
But you probably ran around the gym and did a lot, like all the
machines, and exactly. Like I did everything that I saw that I knew how to do. Like,
have you ever heard? So Chad Wesley Smith, you know, one of my mentors, he tells this story about Ilya Ilyin. He's one of the best, weightlifters of all time. And he was at a seminar with Ilya, and they asked him like, "So when did you start training?" And he said, "I started training when I was 8 years old." And then he said, "Well," or they asked him, "Okay, well, when you were 8 years old, what was your training program like?" And he was speaking through a translator, right? But through a translator, he goes, the translator said, "I ran around the gym and did all the exercises." Now, Chad jokes and he's like, you know, if I had to guess, Ilya Ilyin did not have free reign of a post-Soviet weight room. You know, he probably meant by that was like I had a super general program where my coaches had me kind of doing all of the exercises, right? And I think the idea that I'm getting at is like some of the strongest people I know, their training started out super general, right? They built like a really nice base, whether that was on purpose or not, right? Through playing a bunch of sports, right? Which you did too. And then it wasn't until they got, you know, a lot more advanced and figured out what exactly they wanted to specialize in that they really specialized in. And the point behind that is that you do not train now how you trained back then, right? Nowhere near.
No.
And I think a lot of people would look at how you train now and they want to do your program now. They want to go, oh, I want to be strong like Alec. What is Alec's program? I'm going to do his program.
Not sexy.
No, but like you wouldn't, if you did your program now, back when you were coming up, I guarantee you would not be the athlete that you are, right?
Oh yeah.
So,
no, I mean,
anyways, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to make a point of like you started out very general with your training.
Yeah, I mean, when I started off, it was literally a couple of machines and a ton of abs, and I ran all the time, and I just wanted to have abs and have pecs. You know, this is the typical like 8th grader. I want to look good. And then once I hit high school, I started like learn how to squat, how to do all the proper lifts, a little bit more. Like it wasn't overnight, but it took time. And of course, being in football and track and everything. Like,
say, what sports did you play?
Football, track. I mean, in high school, really, those were my main two. Were football and track. I was a sprinter in track. Did triple jump. I don't think you guys
did you
have
do
triple
any
jump
when
in
you were
Iowa.
little, like little?
I did everything when I was little.
Again, though, going back to the general to more specific,
basketball,
right?
baseball. Hated baseball. I was just terrible at basketball. But then I was like, okay, I can do football.
But
Football
those
was the one.
the skills that you learned within those sports probably carried over a little bit to football and track, right? And
Debatable. My hand-eye coordination still sucked in football, but
well, at least you had some.
Yeah, barely.
So after high school, you went to Ambrose and played football, right? What positions did you play?
Well, I started off as a corner.
Did you? I thought you were just a running back. I didn't.
Nope. I started off as a corner because
you can't
in
catch.
high school. So in high school, I played everything. In high school, I was the kicker. I was the kick returner. I was the starting wide receiver. I was the corner. They put me in a running back sometimes. But where I was the best at was as a kick returner. And so I did really well as a kick returner. And then Ambrose was like, hey, this kid's athletic. We want to bring him in to return kicks. And they're like, also, we'll have you play corner when you're not returning kicks. And I hated playing corner at Ambrose. I mean, also, I just wasn't. I mean, I played at a small high school in Central Illinois. So, like, playing corner there, it's just be more athletic than the guy that is wide receiver, which is easy when you're in a small high school.
Right.
Whereas then, you get to college and playing corner is actually like, oh, you got to read what the offense is telling you. And I was like, nope. Then
Just give me the ball and let me run.
Then I moved to slot receiver, and I actually did okay as a slot receiver like early my freshman year, but it was between freshman and sophomore year, I gained like 15 pounds of muscle. And then my coaches were like, you'd be a lot more effective as a running back. And I was like, and at this point, I'm like really like, I'm full blown, like I love training more than anything. I hated practice. I hated everything out in the field, but I loved training.
Well, you probably also didn't see much of a future in football by that point, right?
That's when I was like, okay, NFL's not happening.
Right. So that's when I think it gets tough, right? Like a lot of athletes, when they don't see a future, like, okay, when you're in high school, you see your future as playing in college. So you're going to push hard for that. But then when you get to college and maybe you're a few years in and you're like, hey, after next year or whatever, this is probably just it for me. It's really hard to be motivated. Where fitness and, training you can do forever, right? Like,
and that's kind of what happened was I realized I was like, I'm the strongest dude on the team right now. Like I was lifting more than a lot of the linemen and everything. Most all the linemen, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And I was like, I have a future in the weight room. I was like, I can make something of myself here. And at that time, I was starting to, I looked very defined. I was like, okay, I want to get into bodybuilding. And then that's kind of what spurred me to be like, okay, maybe it's time to quit football. And then that made me start to look into bodybuilding. I tried bodybuilding, of course, in 2019.
You did one show, right?
Did one competition.
Got your pro card.
Won it, got my pro card. And I was like, I'm never doing that again.
And we should preface natural bodybuilding.
Natural bodybuilding, yes. I got hooked up to a lie detector test, got a pee test. I got thoroughly tested for that one. And the key to natural bodybuilding is that there's not a lot of size in natural bodybuilding that you see on the on the stage. So it's about being super lean. So I was like 3% body fat on stage. And I had and this is while I was in college going to classes. One of my professors literally pulled me aside and asked if I was okay because I had lost like 20 pounds. But I had like only 15 pounds to lose. And I had lost like 20, 25 pounds. I went from 200 to like 174 in a matter of a couple months. Wow. They're just basically starvation. And
wait a second, time out. So how did you lose weight? And you're starvation, I mean, you're kind of being serious, kind of not, right? But the point is, what did you have to do to lose weight?
I ate a super high protein diet. I ate so my carbs like would start like towards the beginning of the peak, which was a 13-week peak, like cutting block. So started like pretty high, and then they slowly got lower and lower. And my coach at the time, and for reference, I mean,
when you cut your carbs, though, you didn't cut anything. Like you didn't cut your protein. Probably you kept your protein.
Protein never really got cut.
But in turn, when you cut your carbs, what did you do? You cut your what else? There's another C word, right? Like you're not serious right now. Calories.
Well, so at first I didn't actually cut my calories. I shifted from carbs to fat.
Okay.
And then it shifted to overall calories.
But you said you starved. So the point is like you ate less food.
In the last 3 to 4 weeks, there was a miscommunication with my coach at the time. He thought I was 2 weeks out, I was 3 weeks out. And so like usually you do like this peak week thing where you really go like you crash low like week out, and you're like super low calorie. And not all coaches do it that way, but I was at like 1,500 calories a day. And then we're like, oh, wait, no, actually, it's next week that I compete. So I had to do another week of that.
Right.
And so, yeah, it got a little messed up there. So I was really in rough shape there. That's why I say I don't recommend natural bodybuilding to a lot of people when they say, like, I want to do it, because it's I would walk around. St. Ambrose is a small campus. And I would walk around that campus and I'd be like, I am dying. Like, I need to take breaks. I was doing fasted cardio every morning. And granted, I looked awesome. Like I had veins coming out of everywhere. Like I was, like you could see all the striations when I moved. It was awesome.
But that's not sustainable.
No.
Right?
And my hormones got all messed up because I legit I went to the doctor to get my labs done because I felt so bad afterwards all the time. And yeah, my testosterone had tanked. My kidney was like had some bad levels on it because of just the fact that I was not getting enough nutrients into my body for so long.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't want to do that again. And there's right ways to do it. There's better ways to do it than how I did it.
Well, probably slower.
Yeah, slower.
Right. Obviously not.
Most coaches would not have you go as low as I did on the calories. And I was, it was just this way that we did it, and it worked.
I mean, you won, right?
Yeah, but I just, I didn't enjoy it. So after that, I took a break from anything for a while. I just kind of was like, I'm just going to lift just to enjoy myself for a while. And then it wasn't until I started coming here that you talked me into powerlifting. I did the first UPA meet, which is, it wasn't a drug tested meet, but I could have paid like an extra $100 for a drug test. At the time I was like,
so basically he was natural, but there was no incentive to do the drug test. There was no drug testing around here. Like there's no drug tested meets around here. We looked for them.
Well, I could have been drug tested at the meet I did.
Oh, okay.
If I would have paid an extra like $150.
Which is funny though, because it's not required. It's not I always say if it's not drug tested, it's drug infested. And so like what I mean by that is like, I mean, one, we went into the bathroom and there's just like needles. In there, right? So the point is though, he was beating all of you won the meet, the whole meet, right? Best lifter of the whole meet. And, against guys who were clearly, taking steroids, which is, whatever, that's their prerogative. But, anyways, like now you compete in drug tested federations because you want to prove yourself amongst other drug tested athletes, and you're willing to travel a little bit more, right?
I would argue
because we were just starting, you were just starting out.
I would argue that the drug tested federations, like so IPF, PA, Powerlifting America, that's like the one I do now. There's USAPL, which is very similar, but that federation I'd say is like probably the most competitive,
right? And I think that's because they know it's the most popular amongst the fans because it's the most relatable, right? Like if you're a kid, no kid like dreams to get on steroids someday, right? So like they want to be like, oh, I could look like that someday. I could lift like that, and they can relate to that. And so it's the most popular, and in turn, being the most popular, who wouldn't want to win the most popular? Like for example, there's different professional football leagues. Like you don't want to go win the Canadian league. Like nobody cares about that, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, I think that's why, which is pretty crazy that the drug tested guys are lifting more than the non-drug tested federations.
Yeah, I mean there's this freak of nature athletes out there, and don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of speculation. There's probably some people that are on some
in their
PEDs.
skirting tests, right?
Yeah, some people are probably skirting test 100%, but I mean the biggest names that are really talented, like look at like the Gavin Aidens out there. He's like this block of muscle guy, just absolute monster. And I would definitely say, I would assume he probably passes all the drug tests he takes, and he gets tested quite a bit.
Yeah, the best guys are getting tested the most.
Yeah, like the guys that are at the top are getting tested.
I'll tell you right now, in Olympic weightlifting, and I know it's different in powerlifting, right? Because is USADA your governing body?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it is in weightlifting too, but like, dude, I'm telling you right now, I've been drug tested multiple times, and if you are taking steroids, you're going to have a really hard time passing these tests and skirting the system. So, I mean, I'm just telling you from my experience, like they take this stuff seriously. And like I said, if you're passing tests, here's the other thing is like, you're probably, if you are trying to pass tests while using drugs, you're not using as many drugs as you would be if you weren't, right? So like, if nothing else, it's really diminishing what you could take.
Yeah. And I mean, I've heard of people that have gotten popped on the test, and like some of them are there has been instances where it's like, oh, well, it was like a tainted supplement or something like that. And I've heard of people who have like actually like been cleared based off of like, oh, well, upon review, you're like, oh yeah, it probably was like just a tainted supplement or something like that. But like, it's strict from what I've like certain medications that like people take pretty often are not allowed to take those. Like ADHD medication is not allowed to take those day of the competition unless you get a form filled out, and that process to fill out that form is extensive.
Yeah, there's some crazy things like what is banned is pretty crazy. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that you wouldn't think are considered performance enhancing that are banned by USADA.
Yeah, it's a very thorough list of things that are banned. Like, it's not just like, oh, you can't take Tren.
Right.
It's like, no, like you can't take anything.
You can't take prednisone, I don't think.
I don't know what that is, but
bro, you've taken prednisone. It's like what you take when you get sick. It's a steroid that you take when you get like this. When your mom's like, they got you on a steroid.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that's prednisone. But like I know Jake, he had to get like a TUE because he got sick before one of our meets, and they had to get him. He had to go on prednisone, and he had to get a TUE to go on prednisone, which is just again like the steroid you get to like that they pair with like an antibiotic.
Yeah, that would be. You have to talk that over with the governing body before you compete in powerlifting too.
It's crazy, right? Like,
yeah.
Which again, though, like the point is that it's really stringent, and you know, like if you are passing tests, like you're working really hard to do so, and it's pretty impressive what these people are able to do naturally. So, okay, any meets coming up?
Not until April. That'll be the national championships again.
Nationals.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And now let's talk a little bit. What's like your training program look like right now? Like, you know, so when you first moved here or when you first came to rep, when I convinced you to go into powerlifting, I coached you for a little bit, and we focused on like a lot of high volume training. It was like high volume, but specific movements, right? Probably basically taking you the next step from like the bodybuilding, because you were kind of still in the bodybuilding style of training. So bodybuilding is going to be way more general movements. Oh yeah. Right. Like, so lots of different exercises, lots of machines,
lots of accessories.
Right. But high volume, right?
Yes, super high volume.
Right. Because that's going to help with hypertrophy. The next thing that kind of what I did for your program was I took the exercise selection and made it way more specific. So in powerlifting, you compete in squat, bench, deadlift. So we did a lot more squatting, benching, and deadlifting than you were probably doing, but we trained still very high volume. Yeah. Right. Now, again, kind of going from more general to slightly more specific. Now, so you got to think specificity comes in two different ways. It comes in exercise selection, right? So you squat with a barbell on your back in competition to depth. That's the most specific and then you do it for 1 rep in a competition. That's the most specific way, most specific thing for powerlifting, right? Would be competition squat, competition bench press, competition deadlift to a 1 rep max. Slightly less specific in each movement would be maybe a safety bar squat, right? A belt squat, right? Or a close grip bench press, right? Or a deficit deadlift. So the exercise selection can be different, but then also specificity is thought of in the same way with rep scheme. So like, again, a set of 10 is less specific to powerlifting than a set of 1, right? Yeah. And so my point is like, I was having you do more sets of 10, right? Like some of those. And then now you're probably about as specific as you can get, I would say, within powerlifting training, and you're doing a lot more heavy singles, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it changes. It really depends on the time frame of where I'm at. So like at this point being, I'm nowhere near competition, like not several months out. So I don't need to be doing like the straight up only linear periodization where it's just progressing, like intensity progresses week over week or volume progresses week over week. My coach definitely is not one that likes to subscribe to just, we only do linear periodization. He likes to throw in some linear stuff. He likes to do undulating here and there as well.
Can we go through those real quick? So
describe those out.
So
linear is, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Like if you look at a graph for linear, it's going to be a bar that just continually goes up and up and up and up and up. And how you kind of weigh that out in powerlifting is there's two different ways really to specify out linear, and that's by either increasing intensity week over week.
Intensity is in weight load.
Yeah, intensity as in weight. So like you're adding more weight to those like top sets week over week.
Yep.
And you can still be going linear by increasing intensity, and you can pull back volume week over week and still keep it a linear progression. And then
that would my typical like idea of linear periodization, or even like a block periodization, still kind of the same. You could do like a block linear periodization would be high volume, so like high reps, lower intensity, right? So high volume, low intensity. So maybe 3 sets of 10 at 300 pounds would be maybe week 1, and then week 2 might be. Or it could be for 4 weeks straight, right? And you try to add weight to that every week, right? It could be 3x10 at 300, 3x10 at 310, 3x10 at 320, right? And then eventually, now we're going to do maybe 3x8, but now with higher intensity, right? So anyways, the idea is that the volume goes down and the intensity goes up usually, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can make it linear. Like you can make linear through like increasing volume week over week. So like keeping the weight relatively the same, but now you're adding like maybe an extra rep to that top set week over week, or add an extra set of that same kind of weight. So you can do linear in a variety of ways. But like, for example, in powerlifting, a way that I really like to do it a lot is where like, for me, like think of like my squat top, like my primary squat day. So like my day where I'm going to go the heaviest, say like week 1 is like I work up to a top set of 1x2 at like a pretty challenging weight. And then over a 4-week block, I slowly progress it up. So like week 2 is gonna be that same 1x2 again, but it's gonna be a little bit heavier. And then week 3, it'll be either 1x2, or maybe it's a single then. Maybe I take that volume away a little bit.
1x2, just to tell people, is
one set of 2 reps.
Right. And when you say top set, you're basically saying we're building up to the most we can do for that given day. And it could be at a specified intensity, meaning it could be, you could have a percentage and you could do that, or your coach, I'm assuming, is maybe RPE scale, right? So RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. Rate of perceived exertion, the chart basically is 1 through 10. And if a lift was an RPE 10, so if you said, hey, how hard was that lift, and it was RPE 10, that means you had no more reps left in the tank. That was as much weight as you could possibly do for that set. If it's RPE 9, then you could potentially do 1 more rep, right? So if he finished a set and you were like, hey, what would you rate that set RPE on the RPE scale? And he said RPE 9, that means he thinks he has 1 more rep that he could have done, right? RPE 8 would be 2 more reps, and so on, okay?
Yep.
So his coach is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's saying, hey, build up to a heavy set of 2 reps and do that set at RPE 8, for example, 1 week. And then maybe the next week could be RPE 9, right?
Yep. So generally, like week 1 is going to be RPE 6. You know, you're starting RPE 6. And to be really technical, the RPE scale is the Borg scale. So RPE 1 through 10 is RPE scale of the Borg scale. Because typically RPE scale, if you don't specify Borg, it's 6 through 20, which doesn't make a lot of sense to people.
I didn't know that.
So no one uses that because it's just kind of stupid. But
well, it started out as they used RPE for something before resistance training, right? Wasn't it? Was it running or?
I have no idea.
Yeah, but it wasn't originally created for resistance training. I know that.
Yeah. So I mean, most people subscribe to the 1 through 10,
okay,
just to keep it simple.
Yep.
But yeah, so usually like week 1 is gonna be RPE 6, and then week 2 could be like 6.5 to 7, and then I usually my scale at like, because I do 4-week blocks, so every month is a fresh block, and then usually it builds up to an RPE 8 to 8.5. Like you never, most powerlifters, you don't ever see them trying to, or with good coaching, you really don't want to see them going 100% maximal exertion consistently, like at the end of every block.
Right.
You want to see their near max exertion just progressively increase block over block. So you want that 8.5 RPE or 8 RPE. You want that to be stronger block over block.
So you want to build the capacity up, like, so you want to be able to do more weight, but you don't necessarily want to do the weight that you know you could do, right? So like, let's say you could squat 300 kilos. Like at one point that was like your max squat, right? So an RP 8 set of 2 might have been 260 or 270, right? When you could do that. Then, you know, your coach later on might say, hey, build up to an RP 8 set of 2. But now you could squat 310, right? Or 320. It doesn't mean that you know, are going to go like now your RP 8 set of 2 would be potentially 280, right? Or, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, give or take, right?
Depends on the day. So that's the glory of RPE is that your RPE one day, so like my RPE 6 one day, maybe I'm feeling really good on week 1 and my RPE 6 is like on squat, it's like 280, 280 keys. So I don't know, like almost, that might be 600 something. I don't know. Pounds.
2.2. Do the math.
Yeah. You do it at home.
280 times 2.2.
But so like maybe I'm like, man, I feel really good today. 280 is my RPE 6 for a set of 2. And the next week, there's other factors like lifestyle factors. Maybe you had a long day before you go into the gym.
Didn't sleep.
Yeah, had poor sleep.
Maybe you got diet. Sick.
Yeah. And so now it's RPE 6.5. But since you're not feeling as good, the RPE 6.5, it might be the same exact weight, possibly even less than the week before.
So you're building up and you're gauging this usually as you're building up. So I know there's probably a lot of questions like, well, how does he know, you know, what weight is he has 2 reps left in the tank? One thing I would say is that you learn over time, right? You really kind of learn your body and you learn how the speed feels, and that takes time. That's why like most people, when I'm starting them out, I don't necessarily throw them into RPE right away, right? I think but anyways, and you get better at it. So even if you were thrown into an RPE style program where coaches say, hey, build up to an RPE, 7.5. So also when we say half, it's kind of like, it's really just, it could be 2 reps. It could be 3 reps. Usually I use it more as, hey, I want you to go a little heavier than last week. So I'm going to give you a half.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what most people use it for. Yeah. That like when I'm programming for powerlifters, that's what I do too. Like I'll throw in 6.5 instead of 6. I'm like, go a little bit heavier than the week before if you can. But I'd say like for me, the biggest thing is that just when you're trying to like look and see like, okay, well, this didn't feel as good, but maybe it moved really well. Like, so if you can record yourself, like it's important for powerlifters to really like record their top sets, which I suck at doing for myself personally. So I'm not practicing what I preach.
We want our weight. Like we have a lot of remote athletes, right? And it's like, dude, record your sets. I don't know what the bar speed looks like if you don't record your set, right? I don't know what the form looks like if you're like, my back hurts, but I haven't seen your lifts in a month. I don't know if you're doing something that's hurting your back, right? Like,
yeah. The craziest thing that I see a lot of with the lifters I coach is that they'll write down like, this is like they overshot, felt like an RPE 9. And when I say overshoot, when I say overshoot, it means like RPE that I wrote down for them to try to aim for was like 6.5, 7, but they feel like it was more than that, so they put like RPE 9. So that would be an overshoot.
Right. They thought the weight they were going to take, like let's say that they tried a 250 kilo squat and they thought that was going to be the RPE 6.5 that you prescribed, but it ended up being much harder.
Yes.
That's an overshoot.
And what I see a lot of the time is that they'll record the set. They'll be like, oh yeah, it definitely felt heavier than that RPE. Like say if it was like an RPE 7, they're like, oh, but it felt like a 9. And then they send me the lift and it's moving fast.
Right.
Like, it's moving quick. It looks really good speed. I'm like, honestly, I would say that it might not have been an overshoot. Like, yes, of course, like when you were picking the weight, go off what's feeling good that day. Like if it felt really heavy, don't say, oh, well, it moved really quick though, so I should just keep going up. Like,
right.
Go off how you're feeling. Like know the best in the moment. Real
versus feel. That's what we call that, right? It's like what something felt like and what it really looked like are 2 different things. That goes for both technique, right? Like I'm sure how many times have you thought like, man, my technique looks like this or that squat looked like this, and then I watch it and you're like, oh, the technique looked different than what I thought it looked like, right? Same thing in sports. That's very common in golf, right? I golf, and my coach that, I've worked with, he'll tell me like, hey, you got to get the club more down the line, less laid off. And I'm like, I feel like I'm down the line. Then I watch the video and it's laid off. And so anyways, I'll have to over exaggerate the other way. But the same thing goes, like you're saying, for bar speed. It might feel like crap one day. Your central nervous system might be shot and you might feel like crap,
Yeah. And I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I always noticed myself is that like my RPE, like 8 to 9, it looks the same as my RPE 6s. Like, unless I'm at like the absolute max end of my strength, and like that, you can obviously tell like I'm struggling like on a 1 rep absolute max, like the bar's gonna move slower on those. But like my RP 9s that are like, I have one more in the tank, it looks almost identical to the reps that are like RPE 6,
Right.
which is what you want. You don't want to have that discrepancy and like, oh, as soon as it gets up a little bit higher RPE, all of a sudden my bar speed slows down significantly. It's not always a bad thing because some people can grind through those lifts really easily.
I'm one of those.
I don't even really know how I am
I don't
as
think
far
you're
as
a
grinding,
grinder.
because
Not on squats, you're not, for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, squat, I can tell as soon as I unrack it if it's going to be a good one or not. Like I can, as soon as I leave the rack, I'm like, this is going to be easy or this is going to be really hard. For bench, for me, pretty much all the lifts are the same. The only one except for deadlift, you don't unrack it really, so until you're pulling. Like
that's part of it, though.
I mean, I see a lot of people on deadlift where they will be at what looks like an RPE 9, like, or almost an RPE 10, and I'm like, oh, they have nothing left in the tank. But then they can just keep going up and up, and they always have these slow grind deadlifts, and they fight through it. And I'm like, I'm not like that at all. I mean, my deadlifts are going to look very quick until I hit the absolute peak, and all of a sudden I'm just like, okay, I'm tapped out. Like,
right. I think that's important though, or it's an important note to say that you need an objective eye to look at bar speed rather than like how you feel. And I think that's another reason it's super helpful to have a coach is like, at the end of the day, you need a coach to tell you when to dial it back. Right. And you need a coach to tell you when to push hard, and they're going to have an objective outlook on it. I know when I first got a coach, the big thing was I needed to dial it back a little. And I bet you were probably similar with Craig, was like, hey, we got to dial back some of this volume that you're doing. Right.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think it's just important to have somebody outside of yourself that's able to have a more objective look and not be so emotional about, the training.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to powerlifting in general, whenever I talk to someone who's like wanting to get into powerlifting or just like they're thinking about just trying it out, I always tell them, don't just try to go into powerlifting like, I'm just going to start doing powerlifting movements and in my training and to see what happens. Get a coach. Like, you're not going to see the progression. If you just go into it and say, I'm just going to mess around and see what happens, you're going to probably end up not doing it long term.
Right.
Because you're going to hit these plateaus. You're not going to know when to dial it back. You're not going to be able to see the progressions that you have made, unless you're really good about programming for yourself. And you're very objective with it. But I mean, I hardly ever see anyone do that.
The other thing I would say is like a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll get a coach once I'm to a certain level. But what I would say to that is, you don't realize, but your training right now could be stunting your growth later on. So like you're not training general enough, maybe you're training too specifically, and you're making a lot of progress, but what you don't realize is you're not building a base, and you're going to hit a fucking, roadblock at some point, and it's going to be a hard like plateau. And then your coach is, if you do go get a coach, you're going to have to go backwards, build a base, and then work back up, right? Where if you would have just done that from the start, because if you would have had a coach that told you to do that from the start, then you wouldn't have had to kind of backtrack later in your training. The other thing is, if you don't have a coach, you're probably way more likely to get injured, right? And if you get injured, that could really
sets you back.
That really sets you back, and it could set you back forever. I mean, there's injuries that happen that you'll never feel the same. You're not saying you won't recover from them, but you'll never be the same from
And two, I mean, an interesting tidbit that I really think is kind of worth noting is that once I got a like specific powerlifting coach once I moved up to Madison, met Craig with LTS. It really opened my eyes to the third factor we haven't talked about in training outside of volume and intensity, which is frequency. And for me, that was like my biggest thing that blew up my bench. Like my bench was always now my deadlift is that's my, like, of course, not my best lift. It used to be bench. It was like, I was terrible at it. My bench was, I couldn't bench over 400 pounds for a long time. And now within like a year and a half, maybe 2 years of having a powerlifting coach, my bench has gone up almost 100 pounds. I'd say about 80 pounds since I started working with him, and it's because of the frequency of it. So like now with bench, instead of just saying like, I see this with so many young lifters.
Yep.
They're like, well, I bench twice a week. It's like, and they're benching twice a week, and there's hammering like 5 sets of like 5, 6. And I'm like, I do like 3 sets, and it's like, I do like 3 sets of like 3 to 4. And
so let's say you equate volume, right? Let's just say that you did the same amount of volume as those guys that are hammering themselves, right? Doing 5, 6 sets.
I am doing pretty much the same amount of volume.
But you're spreading it out over, are you benching 4 days a week?
4 days a week.
4 days a week. Mm-hmm. So this is a big thing that I try to get my athletes. Frequency is so big because everybody, for whatever reason, they think of strength sports so much differently than other sports. And it doesn't make any sense because it's like there's a skill component. There's a big neurological skill component to each lift. And you would never only shoot a basketball twice a week if you're in season for basketball, right? Like you would shoot the basketball every day.
Yeah.
But yet, I think we've been conditioned to think that we need to recover. Like the way that SRA works is it's just, oh, you work hard and then you need all this time to let your muscles recover fully, and then you work hard again. And that's just not how it works. And also, each lift has a different SRA curve.
Yes.
Right?
And that was the next thing I was going to go into is the fact that, so like with bench, the smaller muscle groups, so the chest in powerlifting, bench is going to include the smallest muscle group because your chest is much smaller than your quads, your hamstrings, your back, and everything. And of course, if you're benching properly, you're using more than just your chest, but it's not in the same capacity as like with squat and deadlift.
Right.
So like bench, I can bench 2 days in a row and I feel fine because I'm not pushing it to anywhere near like maximal exertion.
And that's why you're not. That's why when we go back, if we go back to when you said powerlifters shouldn't probably be exceeding RP 8.5 on most of the time. Yeah. It's because you need to be able to train again tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. Right. Yeah.
And I mean, of course there's so many different factors that go into this. Like for women, like they can train, like they can do squats a lot more often in powerlifting because women have a much higher recovery time.
Well, they're slower, so there's more slow twitch fibers, right? More type B fibers, which are going to recover a lot faster. They exhaust a lot less, right? So that's one factor. The other factor is they're lifting less weight.
Yeah.
Right. So there's less
load,
and that's exactly why that's another reason why the bench press is going to be a shorter SRA curve. When I say SRA curve, I mean stimulus, recovery, adaptation. So basically how quickly you recover from each movement. It's because the bench press uses less weight than a squat and a deadlift. So again, just wanted to tack on that.
Yep. And I mean, I always see that. So women typically can do like the big lifts more often. And then the same applies to the really light lifters. So like something that when programming as a powerlifting coach, if you have a lifter who is, 'cause I'm considered like a medium weight powerlifter, like 93 kilo I'm not like a heavy guy, but I'm not like a super light guy.
Yep.
But if you go to like the lighter classes, like the 66 kilo, 83 kilo, those weight classes, the smaller the lifter, the more volume you need to incorporate in their training because since they're doing less, their load is not as heavy. Like you don't see like a 66 kilo lifter putting like 300 kilos on their back for squats. At least not that I know of. And so with those people, like the load, it doesn't affect their CNS as much, so they can handle doing more reps. And so like when you're programming like into a meet for one of these lifters, you need to be progressively ramping up the volume week over week over week. And it sounds like to me, I'm like, it feels so wrong to be like having this lifter going like high RPE, high volume going into a meet. But the thing is, if you pull it back, then they're going to detrain, even though they're still hitting like.
Exactly. So explain detraining real quick.
Detraining is it's basically once you start to go backwards.
From not training.
Yes.
As much.
Yeah. So like if you were to like pull back the weight and the number of reps that you're doing in your training, then you would start to lose.
Well, you'd initially recover.
Yeah, you'd recover.
So the idea is like after, let's say you were peaking for a meet.
Yes.
Right? You would train really, really hard. And then the week before the meet, you're going to dial back a lot of the volume and intensity to let your body recover and super compensate. Super compensate just is your body's adaptation process. It basically is, hey, he's probably going to do this to me again someday. So while he's resting, I'm going to recover and then make myself a little bit stronger. The point is, though, if you wait too long to train again, after your body's done super compensating, it's going to say, wait, maybe he's not going to do this to me. I can now go ahead and relax and let everything kind of atrophy, right, and start going back down.
And so you see a lot of that progress that was made just fall right off.
Yep.
And then like they try to load one of the heavier loads again. It's like, oh, this feels heavy now. And granted, every lifter is different. I have a lighter lifter that I coach now, and for them, it doesn't necessarily work like that for like how it does for all the other lighter lifters. It really depends. You have to get the data of a person over time to really tell how they respond. But generally, the lighter lifters work like that, where you can ramp up the volume continuously into a meet, ramp up volume and intensity, and they will respond to it really well. Whereas like someone that is more my weight class or heavier, then you have to really factor in like, okay, volume needs to be minimal. Like once you're getting ready for a meet, like you have to really pull it back. Like doing a single, you can't be going too high of a low. Cause like if I go into a meet and like I like say like a week and a half out, I'm hitting like an RP 8 or 9, that could really wreck me for like a week.
Right.
And like typically for me, after I hit like a week 4 like heavy single and like a squat or something where I do like a 300 plus kilo squat, I'm wrecked for like multiple days after.
Because 300 kilos is 300 kilos. And I think, yes, it's now, I don't know, maybe 90%, give or take, right?
Yeah,
Because
right about that.
Maybe a little bit more, right? But it's about 90% of your 1 rep max. So it's like, oh, well, let's say that a kid we have can only squat, 100 pounds. 90% of their 1 rep max is 90 pounds. It ain't the same. 90 pounds is not the same as 600 pounds.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it. Like, yes, it is the same relative intensity for you, but the maximal load is not the same. And therefore you are still a human and, barely, but you still are a human. And 300 kilos is going to take a different toll on a human body than, 90 pounds is.
Yeah, so there's so many factors that go into it, which is why I say you need a coach. Because if you try to go at it yourself and you're just trying to evaluate all this stuff out yourself, like, oh, well, I'm a little heavier.
People are probably like, dude, I hope that you guys are enjoying this, like, more in-depth, talk on training. This is the science of training, essentially, right? And hopefully you're grasping it. But maybe if you're not even, what you should take away from this is that you need a coach who does think about all these things, and that there is a lot that goes into this. It's not just exercise selection. Like we've had athletes before that'll come train with us, and then they'll go, "Oh, I know, I know what you taught me. I'm just gonna go do it at the Y now." Right? And I'm like, "Wait, you're like, yeah, I learned all the exercises." It's like, yeah, but you don't know how to apply the exercises. Like that is literally, I don't even know if that's a quarter of it, like, or half of it. It's like, that is just a fraction of it.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into like knowing how to program a training block. Like it's not something that you can just be like, oh, well, I've done a training block before. I can program one for myself, or I could probably write some for someone else. You need to really you need to learn the data over time, and you need to learn how to read data is really the biggest factor. And for me, like myself, I definitely after my first powerlifting meet, I couldn't have gone in and be like, I can write this for myself, or I could write this for someone else.
And you had been doing this you started training when you were 12.
Mm-hmm.
You're 20 what now?
25.
You're 25. So 13 years later,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you did your first meet, maybe you're 24. But the point is, like, you still didn't feel like, 100% ready to program for yourself. It's like, I'm just shocked by how many people, they do this for a month and they think they got it figured out. It's like, you're delusional.
Yeah, no, it takes time. I mean, all the degrees in the world, like, because I had a degree in strength and conditioning, basically, human performance fitness. We did a lot of strength and conditioning courses. And so I learned a lot about, like, that's where I learned what, like, the three main factors of volume, intensity, frequency. But as far as applying them to powerlifting, like, I didn't know the factors about, the lighter lifter needs a lot more volume and intensity to ramp up into a meet. Like, that's not something that they teach you in school. I didn't know.
They probably should. I mean, not because that doesn't even just apply to powerlifting. That applies to all sports.
Yeah.
Is like female athletes recover faster. They can train. They need more volume.
Yes.
Right. Slow twitch fibers or type B fibers, they need more volume. Therefore, and females can recover much faster. Their SRA curves are shorter, so they need more frequency as well. So the point is, though, like, that really should be something, because it's not just powerlifting. It's all sports, and that we take that into account, with our athletes.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot to weigh out, like, across all the factors. I mean, the one thing I would say is, like, the biggest takeaway for anyone that is, like, more in the general level at this moment, and, like, they're thinking, okay, well, maybe I want to get my bench up. Like, you're just a gym bro, you want to get your bench up. There's something I gave advice to someone. They DM me via Instagram, just asking, like, yo, I can't go through coaching, but if you were to, like, give someone advice on how to get their bench up, what would you say? And I told them, how many days are you benching right now? Space it out more, because they were doing twice a week. They were hammering it out. They were just doing like 6 sets. Like,
when you say space it out, you meant higher frequency, meaning space out the volume.
Yeah, space out
not
the volume.
space out the 2 days.
Yeah. And so that person, they bumped up their bench max. I don't know exactly how much, but they broke through their plateau that they had been at for months, and they're like, oh yeah, just
all you
do more days.
told them to do was to do more practice.
Yeah, because you get out of practice very quickly.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, like, you shoot a basketball, you don't shoot it for 3 days, you're going to be rusty. If you shoot it every day, you're going to be a lot less rusty. The other thing is that, sorry, I lost my train of thought here for a second, but basically, when you're, here's what I was going to say is, when you're warming up, you're actually getting a little bit extra volume in from the warm-ups every time, right? Probably. So even though we're equating the volume on the top set, we probably are still increasing volume a little bit. And what we're just able to, if you did, you actually can do more volume in the way you're doing and recover from it, because you're not crushing yourself. Right. So even if we're not equating volume, right, like, I think it's important to note that what you're saying is just increasing frequency. So just taking the same amount of bench or same amount of squat or whatever you're doing and doing it more often is probably going to help. But it's also important to note that if you do space it out, you're probably going to allow yourself to do a little bit more volume, which is also going to drive up progress.
Yep. And so a completely different factor that I just kind of wanted to note as well is that, and this is something that I think is unique to certain coaches in powerlifting, but I think it's an important thing to note across more than just powerlifting, is so many people put a huge emphasis on accessories. I do not. And then when I say accessories, I'm not saying like the lifts you do after your like main core lifts, like squat, bench, deadlift, but like so many, like you see this a lot in non-tested powerlifting, like the guys that are obviously juicing, where they do like, I'm gonna do like these block benches, I'm gonna do like these like basically quarter benches where they put like a wooden block on their chest and everything.
Basically,
like that.
What you're saying is West Side.
Yes, there's so many people that
conjugate method.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that like, oh well, my bench gets stuck 3/4 of the way up every time I'm benching, so I need to work on that part of the motion a lot more. It's like, well, or not. Maybe just work on bench in general. If you get your overall bench stronger, then you're going to be able.
Well, probably.
If that's your sticking point, it's going to be your sticking point. But if you increase your overall strength on that lift, then that sticking point will still be there, but it'll be at a way higher weight.
Here's the thing with that. And that's the reason I'm touching on that one specifically is that's a very common thought process in both bench press and squats, even deadlifts, is we find a sticking point where the bar starts to slow down or stop. And it's usually, almost for everybody, not always, but it's usually right after the hardest part of the movement. So the strength curve of the movement is usually the hardest right at the middle. Right. So if you're about at parallel in the squats, when you come up right when you get to parallel, because that's where the moment arm, right, is the longest. Look up moment arm if you need to. It's bench press. It's about when your elbows are at 90 degrees. Okay. The point is the sticking point will generally always be right after the hardest part of the movement. And so people go, oh, I'm just bad at this movement. In reality, the strength curve is actually easier at that part. So if you only go down to that and come up, you're going to be able to do way more weight, right? Usually. And the problem, actually, what's funny about it is the problem that you're running into doesn't lie at the sticking point and above. It lies below the sticking point because you weren't able to build enough momentum through, like you weren't strong enough through the hardest part of the movement, which is the bottom part of the movement, right? The middle to bottom part, to blow through that sticking point. So by not training the whole range of motion, you're actually doing it ass backwards.
It is very rare that I have ever seen anyone do that method where they say like, oh, my bench gets stuck when I, like right after I get it off my chest or something. So they go, oh, I'm going to work on just the upper half here for a bit and only train the upper half of the bench. It's very rare that I've ever seen that actually work.
Yeah.
Like it is such this misconstrued idea by so many people that are like, oh yeah, if I just do, so like after I get out of the hole in the squats, I get stuck. So I'm going to do just like a quarter squat training here and work on that. It's like, no, if anything, you're going to set yourself back more.
Right.
Because now you're losing all that training that you could be doing with the full range of motion. Doing anything less than full, I have never once programmed anyone to do anything less than the full range of motion. And
because if you're going to do it, why not do it the most effective way?
Exactly.
You know, people used to ask me, and so, well, I want to go back to what you said, like you don't do a ton of accessories, right? But I think that is because that makes sense for you right now. I think when you were a younger athlete, you did more accessories by nature, not necessarily because you tried to, but if you had a powerlifting coach, he probably would have had you do more general training, more accessories. And then now that you're at literally like, so we call it the pyramid of specificity, right? The pyramid of specificity is basically just this concept that when you first start training, broad exercises or general exercises have a broad implication on performance, meaning like, okay, let's extrapolate it to sports. When you first start playing sports, if you play baseball, you play basketball, you play football, you play soccer, all of them are going to transfer over to maybe, let's say the goal is to get better at baseball. All those sports are going to start making you a little bit better at baseball at the beginning, right? Eventually though, as you get better at baseball, those sports will no longer transfer over. Okay. Like Michael Jordan could not go play any other sports to get better at basketball. He would have to play basketball to get better at basketball. Right.
Yep.
So the same thing goes for powerlifting or for Olympic weightlifting or strength sports or just exercises is, you know, when you first start training, if you do some leg extensions, those leg extensions are going to make you probably a little bit stronger in the squat at the very, very beginning, but very quickly. You know, if you're doing lunges, leg extensions, those, when your squat starts to get to be maybe 200-300 pounds, those are probably not carrying over a whole lot of squats at all. And so Alec is at the absolute pinnacle of this idea, this pyramid, to where the only thing that's really going to transfer over to his squat is competition style squatting, right? Like not even just like, you know, there maybe is some slight variations you'll do, but at the end of the day, like, if he wants to get better at squats, he does squats. If he wants to get better at bench press, he does bench press, right?
Yeah, and I mean, right now I'm in a phase where, since I'm so far out from competition, I've been doing more general training to like just work on overall like general strength where I'm at like a lot more.
You're kind of building the base again.
Yeah,
like
a lot more unilateral work. Like when I say unilateral work, I mean like things that are. I don't remember the different planes of motion from school, unfortunately, but things that are like lunges, something that is working
single leg.
Yeah,
basically.
like one leg at a time.
Yeah.
So work on my hip strength, work on my balance, trying to get my hamstring stronger. Not just doing. So right now I'm not doing just like my squats as like my main work for like my leg strength. I'm using other methods also because of working through some injuries. But
right. And you're a long ways out from a competition. So the skill,
so it's okay.
We talked about the skill component, right? Like doing more frequency on the movement is helping build the skill. Well, you don't need the skill right now because you don't have a meet coming up. And that's what is a big thing with our athletes of like playing their sport. It's like, dude, you don't need to play your sport year round all the time. Like you need to do general training in the off season. And then when you get close, that's when the skills needs to be there. Now, of course, they're building the skill all the time. I promise you, he's been training for 13 years. Your skill in the back squat is very, very good, right? Like you can take a little bit of time off from squatting, and going back to squat is kind of like riding a bike, right? But there is a period where you have to get back on that bike before the meet. You can't just go in the meet. And that's where some of these people that do the conjugate method, or, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're doing all kinds of weird exercises. They'll literally do that, like a board press the day, like a couple weeks before the meet.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the results kind of speak for themselves.
It's like, is there going to be a board on your chest at the meet? No. But we know that came from geared powerlifting more or less, right? Like where they would wear bench shirts. And that actually, which is kind of funny because if you think about it, what they were trying to do with that was they were trying to create specificity in their training. So like there's multi-ply, single-ply powerlifting where they will wear bench shirts, which is a canvas shirt that stretches right across their chest, and it assists you to help you lift a little bit more weight.
Shots it up.
Yeah, same thing with they wear a squat suit and a deadlift suit, and it has the same idea. Well, the idea is that the shirt is going to help you the most when you're at the bottom of the movement, and it's going to kind of slingshot you up, like Alex said, until the very top. And then you really just have to use your muscles at the top because that's where those shirts not really helping you. And so the board press, from my understanding, came from those lifters trying to mimic actually what the shirt is going to feel like, but not have to use a shirt all the time in training.
Yes.
Right. Same thing with box squats.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it is that is a good point. It's for lifters that are doing that kind of thing. I could see some potential for it. Like, if you're training.
Well, they don't want to use the suit all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
If the suit's going to do all the work at the very bottom half of the movement, and you're only doing the work really like for the last quarter of the rep, then whatever, go for
honestly,
it. But
we probably don't agree with it either way. But
no,
it's just not something you're interested in general.
But the thing that is the issue is that there's a lot of people who are not doing that kind of competition that think, oh, well, I see these strong guys doing these, so I need to do this too.
They're doing raw powerlifting, which is defined in most scenarios as knee sleeves only. So no knee wraps. Mm-hmm. Okay. There is raw with wraps. That's it. That is something that some people do, but most people it's just knee sleeves. So, and then a normal singlet, like a standard neoprene singlet, not a canvas squat suit, and then no bench shirt, just wrist wraps, no elbow sleeves, nothing like that. So,
and then belt. Yeah.
Right. A belt. And so that's how raw powerlifting is defined. And that's what, Alec competes in. What we're referring to is that some athletes compete in what they call geared powerlifting, which is like there's basically different divisions on how much equipment, how much suits you can wear. But again, I think that sport is dying, and because it's not
raw
really.
powerlifting's gotten a lot more popular in recent years, I'd say. And I think that's kind of taking the mainstream media, like IPF, PA, like they just got a TV deal with like CBS Sports. So like,
that's sick.
Like that's gonna start being on TV now. So like that's a pretty cool thing. I think that just in general, I'm excited to see this powerlifting get a lot more popular. I think in recent years, raw powerlifting has gotten so much more popularity towards it.
Yeah.
Which is why I see a lot more people like doing those kinds of lifting styles where they're not just doing like the basic gym bro workouts when they go to the gym. Like even at like places like, if you go to a Y or something like that, there's always some younger lifters there that are doing some kind of like powerlifting training. Like maybe they're not like competing in powerlifting, but they're training in that style where they're like trying to work on their max deadlifts.
They're trying to get stronger, not just look better.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I think that's like, it's nice to see that. So I remember back when I was in high school and everything, like I was doing bodybuilding stuff, man.
Yeah.
I wanted to like, no one really taught me like, oh, well, you know, there's a lot of benefit to increasing your max squat for like the benefits you could have with football and everything like that. And granted, like I wanted to be strong just for my ego, but like now if like looking back, there's so many changes I will have made to how I trained back then. I would have kept a lot of like general training work in there, but the way that I would have gone about like what I prioritized would have been very different. Like as a younger athlete, like one, I would say I would have put a little bit less emphasis on the weight room.
And more maybe plyometrics and like more athletic movements.
Yes. Because I mean, I think that I was the perfect example of a lifter who prioritized the weight room so much, but I took for granted like the plyometrics. And
now you were training 5 days a week. So when you say you would take
6 days a week most of the time.
Okay, so when you say you would take some, emphasis off the weight room, you're not saying you wouldn't lift. You just are saying like, because all you did was lift.
Yeah.
You probably didn't sprint a lot. You probably didn't jump a lot, right? You probably didn't do any agility drills. And maybe we're talking we need to be lifting 3 days a week, 4 days a week, maybe not 6 days a week. Doesn't mean that it's not important. And I think I just think that's important because I don't think most people are like you in high school and do take the weight room too seriously. I think most of them probably don't take it seriously enough.
I was an odd example where, I didn't like doing, if you're a football player, the most valuable place for you to be is on a football field. Like that's going to be the most valuable place. The weight room is what you should supplement with. Yep. And you should supplement it, especially like in season, like 2-3 days a week of not like super intense training in the weight room, but something that is going to keep that strength there. And then off season, that's when you should be, it should be almost a kind of like 50-50 split,
right?
Where you're doing like field work kind of stuff and then weight room stuff supplemented in there about half the time. Whereas for me, it was 90% of the time I was in the weight room, 10% of the time. But
that's because that's what you love too, right? That's
I just really had a big desire to be in the weight room.
And I think I see some athletes that are like that, and I don't think they should not be like that. And I think that, we've had athletes that start out with, a sport as their goal, and then eventually they shift into Olympic weightlifting or powerlifting, right? And I think that's really cool. So I don't know. I definitely think that, if you want to lift, right?
Yeah.
Like if, it's just, you don't need to lift 6 days a week. I think that's like probably my big one is that like we get a lot of kids like, I need to do it. It's like, dude, honestly, our most popular, I think, option is either 2 or 3 times per week training. So
yeah. And for myself, like I lift less days a week now than I ever did before. Like I used to be a big like 6 day. If I could, I would have done 7 days a week. I had to force myself to take like a rest day at times, like in college and high school.
Yep.
And now it's like, I understand that, okay, if I do 5 days a week and what my 5th day is like just a super chill, like it's just movement. Like I'm just getting in here just to move around.
Right.
And like I go hard, like 2 of those 4 days, the other 2 days, it's like just kind of ramping it up. And my progress has never been better.
Right.
Like, so just having that understanding of like, you don't need to be going absolute maximum effort every time you're in the gym. Like sometimes it's building on the small things, building on the technique, building on just the mental aspect of it. That
basically get a coach, let them tell you, how often to train, that kind of thing. So, and I know, so Alec coaches powerlifting, both online and in person. He's been coaching some powerlifters here at Rep. So if you are a local athlete and you are interested in getting your bench up or your squat or your deadlift, or if you want to compete in powerlifting, Alec has definitely got some spots. We could get a few more clients in there. So let us know.
Come to Rep.
Yeah, come to Rep, man. But we're going to do this again. I think we've talked, it's probably been super long, right? I don't know.
Most likely.
It's been a while. So anyways, we'll wrap this up. Thanks for watching. It's probably my favorite episode so far, and we'll see you soon.
Peace.